now celebrates Black history.
For decades, it's been rumored that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote part of his I Have a Dream speech at a historic home in Gloucester County called Holly Knoll.
The home belonged to one of the most respected Black leaders of the early 20th century, Dr. Robert Russell Moton, and oftentimes served as a meeting place for leaders of the civil rights movement. Dr. Moton and his legacy have been largely overlooked in American history until now.
To know Dr. Moton then would be the same thing as hearing the name Martin Luther King today. So that's why it's so strange to me that, he has become one of America's forgotten heroes.
A hidden gem along the peaceful banks of the York River, and a legacy forgotten no more.
He was an extraordinary educator. Businessman, family man.
Avis Thomas made it her mission to bring the contributions of her great-great-uncle, Dr. Robert Russell Moton, out of the shadows of history. Since learning about her connection to one of the most influential Black leaders of the 1920s and some decades to follow, she's done a lot of research about a man who's paved the way for many.
A lot of ties in history that people in general know about are tied to him.
Dr. Moton was born on a plantation in Amelia County just 2 years after the end of the Civil War. He learned to read early on in life thanks to his parents, who were once enslaved. Dr. Moton would later become a graduate of what's now Hampton University, where he befriended fellow Virginian Booker T. Washington, whom he succeeded as the second president of what was then the Tuskegee Institute.
He was actually the one that wrote the original program for the Tuskegee Airmen, and he actually bought the original plane.
The only Black leader to advise 5 presidents, Dr. Moton was also behind the integration of Black medical staff at Tuskegee Veterans Hospital. And that's just a glimpse of the work towards equality he's credited for. In 1922, he also delivered the keynote address at the dedication of the Lincoln Memorial on the National Mall.
He wanted that diversity, inclusion, equity among African Americans for this country.
In 1935, Dr. Moton retired with his wife to their house built on the edge of Gloucester County, where a replica of his childhood home remains, along with relics like this wooden desk in his bedroom suite.
A lot of conversations, a lot of meals have been taking place in this room. Reverend King, the late Congressman John Lewis, and others have dined in this room.
After his death in 1940, the home was renamed the Moton Conference Center and became the birthplace of the United Negro College Fund. For years, it was a meeting place for some of the nation's most prominent leaders, including Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and most recently, Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earle-Sears, days before her historic inauguration.
Back in the day, this was the place to come to discuss anything dealing with the civil rights movement. They had private meetings. A lot of people didn't know they were taking place.
And it's because of those secret meetings for the purpose of safety that the truth behind a decades-long rumor about one of Dr. King's most famous speeches remains elusive. Now, the tale goes over the last few decades that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spent some time during one of his visits under this tree on this bench to pen part of his I Have a Dream speech, but there's been no evidence to prove it.
He may have did some writing here, but I can't document any of his speeches were actually written here.
Winona Coles is executive director of the Gloucester Institute, which trains emerging leaders and now owns the property. She says that they too have tried to verify the famous rumor, even contacting the King Center as we did. But oftentimes, she says his trips weren't documented due to danger. Where do you think this rumor came from? How did it start?
I think it's because he was here. So some people said it was so close to some of the times that he actually spoke in Virginia at other events or headed to Washington. And so they just think that maybe, something was written here.
So as that mystery continues, the indelible mark Dr. Moton left on American history, now fully in focus. And today, the Gloucester Institute opens the Home Conference Center and the housing spaces around Holly Knoll for seminars, workshops, and church retreats. If you are interested in learning more or would like to schedule a visit, you can get that information on NBC12.com.